All right, how's it going, Patreon folks? Today we're going to be creating this here, and originally my thought process behind making this was showing you how to kind of deal with text, and text isn't really that great in Blender, but I ended up making a full animation and a kind of full design out of it. So we're going to learn how to deal with text, one of my processes, and then we're going to make a really interesting design from this process. So let's go ahead and dive straight into that. First, let's go ahead and get some text. So you'll hit Shift-A, get your text. And then right over here, we'll get our text settings. I always like to center out all of my text. And then for me, I'm just going to type in text in all caps because all caps is really good and tends to be straight up and down geometry, which is what is easy to work with. Right over here in font, you can go ahead and access your computer's fonts right here. I'm just going to go ahead and select this one right here. You can use any font you'd like, preferably ones that have a lot of straight up and down edges, but you notice this one has some curves, and we're going to be able to deal with that. And it's a little bit of a challenge, but it really shows you how to work with it. Right here, we're going to go ahead and bring your geometry and extrude it just enough. You don't want to be too big, but you don't want it to be too skinny either. And then we're going to go ahead and bring that depth up. And I do want to bring my character spacing out a little bit. All right, so that's it for that. We're going to right click and convert to mesh. So now if I go to edit mode here, we can see really, really ugly geometry. So what we're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to go to the wireframe view, and we're going to get a decimate modifier. And then we're going to get the decimate, and we're going to use planar. And that is really going to just go the extra mile and fix that issue. It leaves the proper beveling, but it kicks out the extra geometry that's in these flat spaces. So I'm going to go ahead, hover right here, and hit Control-A and apply that. Now we have great topology. It's certainly not perfect, but we can work with it. So what we're going to do now is go to edit mode and select the little face selector, and then hold down shift and just select all the top faces. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit I and inset it a little bit like this. And then we're going to hit E and extrude it down. Now we're seeing a lot of flaws here in the geometry, and that's just something we can either deal with or remesh. So if you want to remesh it, you can with the remesher, and then you bring up your voxel sizes, and now you have essentially remeshed text that looks pretty darn good. Or, you know, depending on how we deal with the rest of the scene, it'll be invisible, which is what we're going to do here. We're just going to model, we're going to light and shade it. And through the lighting and the shading, we won't see these geometry artifacts. Now, I think if you're, a lot of 3D purists would probably say, no, take the time and fix it. I say, if it's gonna be invisible, then don't worry about it. And that's what we're gonna do today. We're not going to worry about it. So now what we can do is begin the process of lighting and shading. So we're gonna go back to the face select and just select all these faces. Go to the shader menu, click new, get another one, and assign that. Hit the assign button. So we can go to the material preview and click this one and make it nice and metallic. Give it a dark kind of metal. And then number 2 here, we're going to make it emissive. So make it emission. Now we have glowing metallic text, which is exactly what we want. Let's go to shading and manipulate some of these materials just a little bit. So I'm going to bring my world opacity, no world opacity. And then let's go ahead and light, make a cool material here. So we'll get a color ramp, plug that into the color, and we're going to go to a constant offset. So that's just a hard edge, make that a green. And then we're going to get a wave texture. Plug color here, and then with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, hit Control-T, use the object coordinate, and this is going to allow us to actually rotate, which is what we're going to do here. Bring your scale up, and then this color ramp will depict how thick these bars are going to be. And then we can use the phase offset to animate. So a lot of really cool stuff happening, and it's just very fun. We have that. So we have created this whole thing. I'm going to go to slot 1 and make this metal a little bit more grungy with a color ramp and a noise texture. Plug that color into the roughness here. Factor here. Control T and object. So now we have this. We're going to bring that detail to 12, that distortion up. And that's looking pretty good. We can even crunch it in with the color ramp a little bit to really exacerbate that effect. And then let's just go ahead and manipulate it with a bump node as well. Let's just really push that grunge a little bit farther. We'll plug the noise texture into the color ramp, color into the height, and we'll bring that distance to 0.1 and just bring that till it eats into like there, and bring that distance down as well. I mean, that strength. And now we have this really nice looking metallic material on our text, which will really set the tone for the rest of the design. Now we have that. Let's do a little bit of geometry nodes. So we'll go to mesh, plane, very simply. If you don't like geometry nodes, don't worry. This is going to be very simple to do. So we're going to create kind of a gate or a fence to kind of hold this on the ground. So we'll go to geometry nodes. I'm going to kill that window, click new, and we're going to type in grid. Put mesh into geometry, and then just bring that size, you know, whatever you think is big enough, something like that. I'm going to go to the wireframe view and then bring up my vertices this way and bring up my vertices this way. In fact, we're going to make this much bigger, something like that. All right, now let's get a triangulate node, and then the magical dual mesh, which will make a really nice looking fencing. And then maybe we can bring those vertices up some more. All right, now we have that. We need to go ahead and get a mesh to curve, curve to mesh, get a circle, a curve circle specifically, and plug the curve into the profile curve, and then bring that radius to 0.02. Now we have this kind of fencing look. We're going to get a set material node. And that's going to allow us to actually give this a material. Let's go ahead and use this one just to see how it looks. I think it's good. Let's go ahead and click on this guy in that material, and we'll just click the number 2 so that we can make him brighter, and he'll be able to kind of react to the environment around it. And the last thing we want to do is get one more plane and scale it up much bigger than the fence, and then bring it right below the fence. Like that. Control A, apply that scale. And let's go ahead and create kind of a cement look. So we'll go back to shading, click new, and then we're going to go ahead and get it kind of a gray. Bring your roughness up. We're going to get a bump node, plug that into the normal, get a color ramp, plug that into the height, noise texture. So we're going to do the same thing we just did on the metallic material, but at a larger scale here, hitting Control T for that mapping. Plug that there. Okay. So bring that detail to 12, bring that roughness pretty high up. Then bring this, scale this up like that. Something like this. Bring that strength down. Let's get a color ramp for this color, this base color here. Plug the color into that color ramp. Okay, now we can just kind of bring this in. So now we have this, and then we can bring this up to a mid-gray. Boom. Very, very quickly we have this weird looking cement looking thing. We're going to bring the distance to 0.1. Something like this. All right, cool. Now we have something for this back portion. Now all we have left to do is our lighting. So we'll go back to layout, and I'm going to be using Eevee for this. So I'm going to switch over to the Eevee render engine. Make sure you have bloom turned on, screen space reflections, and ambient occlusion. So now that we have this, well, let's go ahead and get a light. We'll get a point light. I'm going to hit G and move it up here. And then we'll bring that, make it a little bit brighter, something like this. Give it kind of a blue hue. And then let's get some volume. So go to the world icon, principled volume, and then bring that really low, just enough to kind of give it some haze. And then this point light can get brighter to take advantage of that haze. So there we go. Now we have this. We're going to get our camera, Control-Alt-0, snap that to view, and I'm going to go with a orthographic view like this, and then bring that orthographic scale in. And then orthographic gives you really, really dramatic depth of field. So we're going to click on depth of field and then bring that focus distance. And that is really going to sell this really, really well. And then you can bring that f-stop something like this. Orthographic scale can come out. Boom, we have this. Now all we have left to do is animate our material. So we'll go back to shading. Click on this guy, and again we have this, maybe go to slot number 2, phase offset. So we're gonna rotate this a little bit more dramatically. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna gauge where to make this offset start, just visually. So I'm gonna use when this little dot here comes into view, because we need to loop the phase and I don't want to do the math. So right there. So now what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and bring up a timeline. Go to a timeline here. And we'll go back to frame 0 and we'll give ourselves 80 frames. So now let's go ahead and remember, so we need to stop the phase when we get back to that, like barely a dot being there. So hit I, go to the end, and let's see how many phases we want. We'll do that many phases, and then just bring it back. I. And now we have a loop. Perfectly seamless loop for our text. And then you can kind of see that kind of clip in. That's just an Eevee thing, but everything is working the way we want it. And you can go ahead and change whatever color you'd like as well. You know, you can have fun with it. Do whatever you want. And there we go. Apologize if you can hear my cat making noise back there. But this is the animation, and I certainly would want to make this material much more reflective. It's not being very reflective here, so let's see. Make this nice and shiny. Right here, make this portion black. There we go. Bring in that color ramp like that. There we go. That looks much, much, much better. Cool. And there you go. That is how you create this very quick animation. Kind of teaches you how to deal with text in Blender and make that work. And maybe you can even make that bloom not quite as intense. Now my cat is making dinging noises in the background. So we're going to end it here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned some stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to message me here on Patreon, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.